NF registry is very, very important to me. I can remember the first time that I started getting involved in the Children's Tumor Foundation, and I can't remember who told me, but the first thing they said is to please register.
So one of the reasons to join the NF registry is you get to hear about all these cool opportunities that are for drug trials or research opportunities.
Your information goes into the registry bank. And not only are they making a difference for you, but they are also making a difference for every single person that has NF.
I think everyone should join the NF registry because, first of all, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't take any time. You just get emails that tell you about really cool research opportunities that oftentimes give you benefits, whether that be money or trips to different cities, and you get to be a part of their research and give them data that can help them develop new drugs, that can help you, that can help other patients with NF. Even if you don't really feel like it would help you personally, knowing that it will help someone else with NF and knowing that they could be a part of a trial that could help you, we're all a family, so whatever you do can help someone else just like yourself.
So every single person that's sitting out there that has NF, that is not sure what to do, register, and let's make a difference for NF.
Please welcome back Chris Mortell.
Welcome back, Chris Mortell. And again, regarding the registry, guys. Okay, thank you. All right, so we have done tons of surveys asking people with NF what they do to take care of themselves when there aren't other therapies available. There's all kinds of stuff out there, and I know for a fact a bunch of you are using that stuff. And it goes from weed for headaches to turmeric in your diet, and being aware of all the stuff in between is important, but also providing evidence-based structures so that people are taking therapies that we know are effective are really, really important. So I'm just going to tell you a personal family story. My dad was head of oncology at the Mayo Clinic. And years ago, some of you will remember, there was a drug that came out called Laetrile. And Laetrile was derived from apricot pits. And people were saying that it was the miracle cure for cancer. And people were driving to Mexico to get their Laetrile. And he actually did a clinical trial to prove that Laetrile worked, but oops, the clinical trial proved that Laetrile didn't work. And that's why we don't hear about Laetrile anymore. A few years after that, Linus Pauling, a Nobel Prize winner, came out saying that vitamin C was the cure for cancer. Take megadoses and it will cure your cancer. Well, my father did a clinical trial on that at the Mayo Clinic to prove that it worked, and it didn't. So, so I do have nutraceutical secondhand experience, and it's something that I did along with my dad for a few years. And I remember I said, "Geez, Dad, Linus Pauling," and he goes, "Yeah, poor guy." So anyway. So today we're going to talk about specific nutraceuticals, but I want you to be aware that I'm going to be here for 5 more days. For those of you who are here for a couple more days, feel free to bug me. I've already learned a lot from people who have told me about nutraceuticals that are out there and trials that are going on, so I'm looking forward to learning more. I'm from Minnesota, and a bunch of you aren't, so I thought I'd just clue you in about Minnesota and some important things. This is Bob Dylan as a young man. He was born in Hibbing, Minnesota. Are they still in the room? And we have people from Hibbing here at the meeting. And then attended the University of Minnesota for 1 year before he went to New York and became a star. Judy Garland was born in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. Hi, Judy. Prince, is from Minneapolis. We used to go down to the depot when I was a young man to watch Prince, but I was into punk rock and I thought that funky stuff was weird, so I went to another club. 3M makes Scotch tape and Post-it notes. Without 3M, which was originally Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, you wouldn't have Scotch tape or Post-it notes. And of course, we all love our Cheerios, made by General Mills. We fed the world from Minnesota and still do. And of course, the Pillsbury Doughboy, Minnesota. And the list goes on and on. We have more Fortune 500 companies per capita than any other state in the nation. So there it is. Anyway, so at the University of Minnesota, we've taken a real strong interest in finding therapies that will be tolerable over the long period, or therapies that have the potential for prevention in people with NF1 and schwannomatosis. So we have embarked on a project of finding these drugs out there and doing clinical trials. You know, I'm not original, I'm following my dad's lead, doing clinical trials to try to prove that these will help people with NF. So it starts with this question: is it possible to suppress NF1 tumorigenesis, that is, creation of tumors, with an anti-inflammatory dietary intervention? So nutraceuticals are a food or part of a food that provide medical or health benefits. They're typically sold at places like GNC or your grocery store in the form of pills, powder, or other medicinal forms, which are generally not associated with food. Examples that you guys take every day: vitamins, probiotics, omega-3 fatty acids. Polyphenols are sometimes found within foods, and they're bioactive chemicals. They're secondary metabolites of plants, and they're usually involved in defense against ultraviolet radiation or insult by pathogens like viruses and other things in the plant. So knowing that those things are out there and have maybe medicinal potential, we're looking at NF1 specifically. I'm sorry, I'm not talking about NF2 or schwannomatosis today. That's left for the future. But NF1, as we just learned, is a negative regulator of RAS signaling. And if you have a negative regulator, means it keeps RAS from being expressed. And if you have active RAS, it triggers a pathway that then leads to tumor growth or other conditions that people with NF deal with. So I'm going to ask you to memorize 3 things here. First, active RAS, number 1. Number 2, that triggers RAF, MEK, ERK. Can you repeat that with me? RAF, MEK, ERK. That's NF1. But there's a secondary pathway, just call it PI3K, AKT, mTOR. All right? Can we repeat that? PI3K, AKT, mTOR. And guess what? We already know that the RAF-MEK-ERK pathway has a drug against it. And that's approved, called Koselugo, that a bunch of you use. The PI3K, AKT, mTOR pathway also has a drug, everolimus. So we have experience with using those drugs to help fight the effects of NF. But we've also learned, and many of you have learned it in spades, that these drugs have side effects and can't be used over a long period of time. Now it gets even messier, and I'm sorry about this slide, but let's try to undo the mess. On the left is all the PI3K, mTOR, RAF-MEK-ERK stuff going on, but then on the right are all the cells that are recruited in once that mutation happens and things get rolling. So you can see Schwann cells, the lining of nerves. mast cells, which are inflammatory cells, macrophages, which are immune cells, all kind of coming together to make things happen, to grow tumors, to make you itch. All of those things happen as a result of those pathways being turned on. And there's Koselugo, we know about that, and darned if it hasn't helped a lot of people. And here's from one of the New England Journal articles showing a young man with a big plexiform neurofibroma that shrunk because he took Koselugo. And I can't tell you how pleased I am that we came upon this drug and it's really helped tons of people. But it has toxicity. For those of you who have used it, it can affect your skin, it can affect your heart, it can affect the GI tract. I have one patient who loves McDonald's, but she does it once a month. She's taking her MEK inhibitor, and she goes to McDonald's, gets her meal, goes home, and eats it at home, knowing as soon as she's done, she's got to run to the bathroom. But hey, it's important for her. And then finally, eye side effects, which are very rare, but something you have to consider because vision is nice to have. So all those toxicities make it frustrating for us to think about MEK inhibitors as a long-term fix. So maybe there's things out there that we use every day that are better and have a better safety profile. One of these is high phenolic extra virgin olive oil. And this is not the olive oil you buy in the store, unless you're going to super fancy olive oil shops. It costs about $45 to $100 a bottle, and it's olives that are harvested early, so they have this high concentration of phenolic substances. And one of them is oleocanthal. It's the primary ingredient in this olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil has primarily monosaturated oleic acids or oleocanthal acids, and a minor fraction has other things like polyphenols, including, again, oleocanthal. And this is a certificate of analysis for our olive oil from the University of Athens. Thank you very much. And we've also done double checking to make sure we know what the concentration is in the olive oil we're using fancy schmancy science. So interestingly, when you put oleocanthal into a test tube, we see that it inhibits mTOR, that pathway, remember, PI3K, mTOR, and it gets in the way of it working the way it's supposed to work. In addition, oleocanthal is cytotoxic to cells that have a RAF-MEK-ERK pathway turned on. Interestingly, it doesn't have any effect in normal cells, but in those cells that really have revved up the mTOR pathway or the RAF-MEK-ERK pathway, it seems to get in the way. So the little green arrows show where oleocanthal is doing its business. It whacks ERK, it whacks mTOR, and it whacks another chemical called TNF-alpha and NF-kappa B. And all of those things we did in our lab to prove that indeed that's the effect that's going on. Curcumin is the other medicine we're using, nutraceutical. It comes from the turmeric root, and it's been used for literally hundreds of years in India and China. And extensive research over decades has shown that it's an anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and has some antiviral properties. I'll bet you there's at least 10 people in this room who take turmeric every day. Raise your hands and prove it. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, okay, at least 10. Got it. All right. One of the drawbacks is that it's really not very bioavailable. So you can take a bunch of turmeric, and then if I check a blood level, not much of it has gotten into your system. So people have to take super high oral doses of the usual turmeric that's out there. And so what we've started to do, here's where we get fancy again, we're now using nanocarriers. And we use a specific nanocarrier, which is a lipid particle, and we've impregnated the curcumin into these lipid particles. And this is patented as Longvita curcumin. And using these nanocarriers now, we can get really high levels of absorption. And we've worked with scientists in several different places to confirm that. Curcumin, look at this, curcumin also affects ERK, mTOR, NF-kappa B, and TNF-alpha. But what it also works on is histamine, which is an inflammatory, and IL-1 beta, which is also an inflammatory cytokine. So, and you guys all know histamine, because if you get bit by a mosquito and you scratch, that's histamine that's been released from mast cells, and there's the mast cell, in the skin whenever you get bit by a mosquito. Guess what? Mast cells are activated and recruited to the skin of people with NF1, and if you have NF1 cutaneous lesions, those have mast cells in them. And if people wonder why they itch more than their friends and family, that's why, because you have mast cell activation going on. Curcumin is kind of a controversial medicine, and unfortunately there's been some bad science around it. And there was some science at MD Anderson that had to be kind of re-scrubbed, and 19 papers were retracted for research fraud. So there's a lot of starting over we're having to do with curcumin right now. So here's kind of the crux of the issue, the Western diet. And a few weeks ago, Warren Buffett was interviewed, and he said, who are the happiest people in the world? 6-year-olds. And what do 6-year-olds love? Pop and candy. And so Warren Buffett and his partner, Charlie Munger, drink about 5 or 6 cans of Coca-Cola every day. Of course, he owns about 10 to 15% of the company, so that helps too. And guess what else he owns? A fine Minnesota company named Dairy Queen. And so he loves his pop and candy. But people with NF and other conditions should not love pop and candy, because it's not going to help you if you already have a condition that's turning on inflammatory cells or has other chemical pathways that are already revved up. And so people have really turned to looking at the Mediterranean diet. And guess what's in the Mediterranean diet? Olive oil and turmeric, and hopefully soon curcumin. And so there was a clinician scientist in Italy and other scientists this is the Italian study. This clinician scientist in Italy gave people a Mediterranean diet with curcumin and olive oil, and darned if he didn't see tumors shrink. That's the MRIs with the arrows. That tumor shrunk. And skin lesions disappear or shrink. He only did this on about 3 patients. And so this was kind of what turned on our curiosity about this. If this was effective, maybe it could do more for our patients. And if you look at plasma levels of curcumin in the Mediterranean diet with curcumin, sure enough, they were able to achieve high levels. Here's another interesting thing that especially the women in the audience need to be aware of. The risk of breast cancer in NF1 is far higher than the general population, and you'll get it at an earlier age if you get it. And so the NF group is specifically predisposed to breast cancer. Well, a number of years ago, an important study was done, the Predimed study that looked at the prevention of cardiovascular disease with a Mediterranean diet. But while they were looking at that, they also looked at breast cancer rates. And sure enough, by eating a Mediterranean diet high in olive oil, breast cancer rates went down in the population, and this is not an NF1 population, this is a general population, but breast cancer rates went down in those people eating a Mediterranean diet and drinking olive oil. And here's what happened with the invasive breast cancer risk. There's a control diet, I guess that's the Warren Buffett diet, and then a Mediterranean diet with nuts. But if you had a Mediterranean diet with extra virgin olive oil, look at how much lower your breast cancer risk was. So from my point of view, and thinking about the multitude of patients I've had with breast cancer, this is something that caught my attention also. So we looked at this directly in the lab, as I said, and we looked at the combination of curcumin and oleocanthal in cell lines that we grew in a test tube. And sure enough, as I said before, we significantly inhibited mTOR signaling, and we suppressed phospho-ERK, RAF-MEK-ERK, in patients with MPNST cell lines. That's cancer cell lines. And so we were happy to see those results. In at least one case, mTOR signaling effect was inconclusive, but for sure, phospho-AKT was suppressed in NF cell lines. So we're pretty satisfied with what we saw. And sure enough, if we look at Western blots, fancy Western blots and other things, we see that we can significantly lower mTOR and MAP kinase, that is RAF-MEK-ERK signaling, with the combination. The combination especially is very potent. And so one of our staff has a son with NF, and she proceeded to treat him with curcumin and olive oil, and he happily kind of drinks his olive oil every night and takes his curcumin twice a day. And sure enough, over time, the neurofibromas in his neck shrunk and changed in character. This is a picture very much like a picture we'd see in somebody taking a MEK inhibitor. So I was encouraged by this. And so we decided to go forward with our trial, and the intervention is, of course, curcumin and olive oil. And we're starting our curcumin with a dose of 1,000 milligrams and then elevating it in 3 different patient groups to 4,000 milligrams or 4 grams of curcumin. And that's based on work that's been done in Alzheimer's disease and other conditions where they've tried curcumin. And then high phenolic olive oil we're giving in a standard dose so that we can achieve a level of oleocanthal that we think will be therapeutic. So we're looking to get 21 participants, and so far we've enrolled 7, and we're targeting young adults greater than 18 years old and older adults too. The trial will last 12 months because this is basically a safety and dose-finding trial, and the primary objective is to establish safety, but we'll also assess, and we are assessing, cutaneous neurofibromas, MRIs in people who have a plexiform neurofibroma. We'll be looking at inflammatory biomarkers to make sure that our intent is coming true. And of course, we'll look for any toxicity or drug interactions that might happen as people are taking these. So we want to learn if these compounds will show an inhibitory effect. We want to construct a larger, more comprehensive clinical trial based on the evidence we gather in this clinical trial. And we want to investigate the effect of these compounds on signaling pathways in NF1-related cell lines and mouse models. That work will continue. So, in summary, if you're going to prevent cancer with NF1, don't depend on curcumin and olive oil. First, eat right, and I think that I've shown you some information about the Mediterranean diet that might get you there. Drink right. Don't overconsume alcohol, even if you are in Scottsdale. don't lay in the sun, don't smoke, and all girls and boys should get the HPV vaccine. It's one of the most important cancer prevention tools we have. And then finally, if you have NF1, start breast cancer screening at age 30. At age 30, your primary physician should know that. So I'd like to thank the people I work with every day. David Largaspada leads our laboratory effort. Pavlina Zverak is the person who's kind of taken the lead in making this happen in our clinic. And Kyle Williams is a former Young Investigator Award winner who is doing most of the lab work. And then Prokopios Magiatas is our colleague in Athens, Greece, who's helping us out. Thanks a lot. I have specific instructions for you. Let me make sure I've got them here. All right. After this presentation, lunch is being served in the foyer. Please take your plate to Palomino 1 next door, and the award ceremony will begin at 1:15. I just wanted to get that out of the way. Now I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks a lot. Microphone people.
Okay. We'll start from the back.
Thank you, Doug, for a great
Hi, Conrad.
talk. Howdy. Thanks for a great talk. This isn't so much NF tumor related, but cancer or cancer treatment as a whole. I've done a lot of research on intermittent fasting. I lost 50, almost 60 pounds by intermittent fasting in the last 2 years, and it's changed my life, changed how I feel. There's a lot of evidence that demonstrates that intermittent fasting suppresses tumors, if not causes tumors to go away, depending on the cancer, of course. Have you done any research or looked at that at all? There's one study that says if you do 1 7-day water fast per year, you can cut your lifetime cancer risk by 80+%.
Mm-hmm. I'm aware of those things. I haven't done any personal investigation. I would caution people about fasting, especially parents who want to encourage fasting in their children, because we really don't have any firm evidence in people under 18. And so even though it sounds great, and I think it's great for people, for adults who want to do it, please don't do it with your kids yet. And Conrad, I know for a fact people are investigating this, but I know for a fact I'm not, so I'm not going to get into it too much. But how many people in the room are doing any fasting right now? 1, 2, 3. Okay, great. You bet.
We'll do this.
I'm dependent on the microphone, sorry.
Yes, I'm curious about how much olive oil do you need to drink in order to make that?
Yeah, keep in mind, we're using a special kind of olive oil, and the people who are doing this are taking 2 tablespoons a day, but it's nasty. It's super peppery. It's not olive oil like we cook with. And so the people who do 2 tablespoons of this stuff are chasing it with fruit juice or Coke or all kinds of stuff, and they've figured out a whole system to do this. So we've kind of warned people about it. Some people can just down it and do it, but it's hard. So keep in mind, this is a clinical trial, and the people in Spain just used extra virgin olive oil as part of a Mediterranean diet, and that was not the super peppery yuck stuff. That's just regular olive oil off the shelf. And so if you use it, I hate to say this, but get rid of butter in cooking. Use olive oil. Use olive oil on salads. If you start with that, then you're adding enough olive oil to the diet to make a difference. Remember, a lot of these diets had curcumin in them too, and I'm not trying to get people to run out and buy curcumin because, again, this is still a clinical trial. We don't have firm evidence, but using olive oil without curcumin, I think, it'd be nice to use it with. So just think about that. And remember, somewhere on the label it should say Longvita, because that's the concentrated stuff that you can absorb better.
Hi, I am a parent of an NF adolescent, and I see these Nutraceuticals all the time on, like Facebook and things. So if we're interested in it, or if it's indicated at all for our child, who do we ask? Or is it just we try it, trial and error?
I know a lot of primary physicians are familiar with this stuff. I know if you're getting care at a larger academic center, they have people who specialize in complementary therapy, and there are primary resources when we have people coming in telling us that they're taking St. John's Wort or you name it. So if you're at a center that has that kind of resource, use it. Make sure that if she's being treated for any other conditions like high blood pressure or anything like that, make sure you tell your pharmacist so they can look at interactions, because we've already run up against interactions with just olive oil and curcumin. So before you start anything, make sure you're on that.
Thank
and
you.
Make sure your primary physician knows. Can you pass it up to him?
I guess my question is, with this olive oil, like just cooking with it, denature that protein and you don't see the effects that you may desire, or does it need to be like raw olive oil that's not cooked or modified in any way? Yeah.
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know. We're taking it raw.
Okay.
Just because we know that oleocanthal's in there, but I'm betting you $10 if you heat it up for long enough, oleocanthal's not going to be there.
Okay.
So, but again, in the Spanish study, the breast cancer study that I told you about, they were cooking with it and doing everything. They just made sure it was part of the action.
Okay.
I can't imagine making my eggs without butter, but guess I got to learn how.
or cornbread.
Yeah, right.
I know this is tiny bit off topic, but if histamine and mast cells are such a big part of the problem, why can't we just use like diphenhydramine at higher doses?
Yeah, well, what does diphenhydramine at high doses do?
Sleep. Oh.
So we have tried, and I had a discussion with somebody else about mast cell stabilizers last night. Remember, we use mast cell stabilizers to treat asthma. So there's Singulair is a mast cell stabilizer. There's a number of others that aren't as sedating as Benadryl, which is diphenhydramine. So we're just trying to find things that number one, you can use long term. Because if you've got a kid and you're, maybe someday this will be a preventative, right? Pie in the sky dream, hope so. If that's the case, do you want to have your kid on Benadryl for 10, 15 years? I think not. I would rather it be incorporated into their lifestyle and prevent it that way. Does that make sense to you?
I think so.
But if you're an adult or a teenager who's got itch problems, and I know even little kids with itch problems with their plexiforms and other things, then yeah, you can definitely use Benadryl at nighttime. Just don't get into a habit with it.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation. I was interested in your thoughts or
hi.
or any available data on high doses of vitamin D.
High doses of vitamin D I don't know about, but you know, because you're asking the question, that people with NF have bone issues and vitamin D issues. And we live in Minnesota, so guess what? Over half the year our bodies are covered and we don't have sun to make vitamin D. You guys in LA have it made. But anyway, so what we make sure in our clinic, we always do a vitamin D level every year, and we make sure people are supplemented. But beyond that, I can't tell you about high-dose vitamin D other than if you take too high a dose for too long, it's toxic.
Some of the claims that I had seen were related to cutaneous neurofibromas and reduction in number or size.
Yeah. I've seen that in my general review, but I've not seen any direct effects. And I've seen kids get terrible headaches from vitamin D and other issues, so I kind of discourage taking too much of it.
I have a question.
I'm getting whiplash.
Sorry.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Sam. This is the first time I hear the recommendation about the HPV vaccine. So can you just highlight the reason for it, and then how does it relate?
Sure. Yeah, human papillomavirus is a major cause of genital warts, and if you're a child born through a birth canal with genital warts, then you can get laryngeal warts and oral warts, and it can cause terrible airway problems. Once you acquire the virus, and it's also traded sexually, so people can get warts on their genitalia and communicate it to other people during sex, and then the birth canal's affected, and as the baby comes out, they get it. So we know that it's a major cause of head and neck cancer, and we know that, the celebrities who've had head and neck cancer can cause cancer, excuse my French here, but cancer of the anus, cancer of the penis, and of course cervical cancer. And cancer of the cervix is still a huge cancer problem. So if we vaccinate our population effectively, we're going to drive down the rates of head and neck cancer and cervical cancer substantially. And it's already showing its effect. It's already showing its effect. We can save thousands of lives a year if we use that vaccine appropriately.
Okay, thank you.
And the age, by the way, continues to go down. So my sons were vaccinated when they were 10. My daughter, who was a little older, got vaccinated when she was 12. Two shots. They love it. Not.
So it's a
but
general...
remember, NF1 is a cancer predisposition syndrome.
Oh, I see.
So why fiddle around with another cancer that could be very, very complicated? And we know that treating people with chemotherapy or radiation who have NF1 makes their therapy very complicated and can cause side effects that we're not willing to bear. So prevention, whether it's with a goofy thing like a diet or with a vaccine, is super, super important.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have one more over here,
Okay.
and then we have to break for lunch.
Sure.
But I wanted to tell everybody that if you put your questions in the Whova app under this session, either Dr. Mortel or somebody from CTF can get answers back to you.
For sure.
I actually have two questions. Is that okay? The first one's short, I think.
I have a question and a comment.
Right. We have a 5-year-old, so I'm wondering about the therapeutic dose for a child for the curcumin.
Yeah, good question. I don't know.
Okay.
And that's why we're starting in adults first, so we can kind of find the sweet spot for effectiveness and toxicity in adults, and then we'll go on to kids after that.
Okay.
I know that there's literature out there, but I'd be a little wary about using it in too young a child. I think olive oil is kind of a good start.
Okay.
Lifestyle change in your household.
Right. I think that kind of leads into the next question, in that he is already taking a higher dose of or a supplement for vitamin D, because when he was diagnosed, I happened to be on a Facebook page and learned that it's pretty well established now that vitamin D is very helpful in tumor suppression. But that was something I had to seek out in our NF clinic, and one of our providers happens to order that test every year, and still didn't seem to be really even knowledgeable about it being, him needing like a higher dose, not necessarily just a supplement. And you spoke about how in your clinic, it's customary for every person in the clinic to be tested and on a supplement. And I know other clinicians in other clinics, across the country are doing the same, but our clinic has basically no inclusion of nutraceuticals. And so I guess, I don't know if this is a question for you, but or maybe more of a comment for the clinics. I guess I'm just wondering, it seems like such an important part of the therapy for NF patients, and I'm just wondering why there's not more standardization across the clinics to include nutraceuticals.
You know, there was a study done by a Southern clinic a number of years ago, probably, I'm so old now, it was probably 10 years ago, and they didn't show any vitamin D deficiency in their clinic. Well, they were in the South, and people, I think it was in DC as a matter of fact, and so, people are exposed, they're outside, they're exposed to the sun all the time, and their vitamin D levels were okay. But, that kind of excluded a huge part of the country that is coded, for most of the year. So that's why we did our own look at our own clinic, and of course have communicated it to others, like from Chicago North, to be aware of this and be on it. I would still be hesitant about supernormal values of vitamin D, though. I don't think it's super well established, but I do know that the benefit of vitamin D in normal levels is definitely established. So. Do you go to Children's Mercy, or okay? She's just trying about who to talk to get this stuff incorporated, and I think that's the purpose of the meeting that's coming up in a few days. We're actually presenting our laboratory data at this meeting. So as time goes by, people who attend these clinics, the physicians who attend these clinics should make it one of their priorities to be well educated about this stuff, right? And so this meeting and the stuff that comes out of this meeting will definitely help to get the word out. But we talked about this earlier, right? Advocacy. This is the kind of stuff you guys need to do too. If vitamin D levels aren't being routinely checked in your clinic, maybe you can self-advocate about that and say, hey, I want to know. Okay, thank you all. Appreciate it.
You know I'm bad at communication. It's the hardest thing for me